Hello and welcome to the Love and Compassion podcast with Giselle. We believe that love and compassion have the power to heal our lives and our world. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more amazing content. Today we're talking about coming back together after estrangement. And I have my good friend, Iona Sky, who is a globally recognized social worker, consultant, and educator whose work is rooted in compassion and systemic change. For over 2 decades, they've helped organizations transform policies and cultures through equity, inclusion, and accessibility strategies. Iona inspires leaders and students alike to see compassion not just as a value, but as a powerful tool for justice. Please join me in welcoming my good friend. Hi, Iona.
Hi, Giselle. Thank you for
Yay.
having me here. I'm
Oh,
thrilled
thank
to
you
be a
for
part of this.
Thank you for being on the show. And I'm so grateful to be able to chat with you. I mean, you and I have worked together for many years in the field of child welfare. And we did, as we were talking off camera, we did some transformative work around the voices of children and the voices of families and how to work in more empathetic and compassionate ways. You were talking a little bit in your story about estrangement that happened between yourself and your parents because you're part of the LGBTQ community. I was wondering if you could share a little bit about helped you make the decision to come back together?
Thank you for that question. When people see me and my mother now, my dad passed 9 years ago. You know, I think they would be very surprised to hear perhaps that we did not have any contact for 7 years. And that was purely based on who I am as a person, my sexual orientation, and what my parents' journey in understanding and what their story was. So 7 years of no contact, and I got married to my partner, had a son, all of these things. And it was actually at my brother's engagement party. When I was invited, I went by myself and I saw my parents and from across the room after 7 years. And I looked at them and
Wow.
I remember looking at them and seeing how they had aged in 7 years.
Mhm.
And in my heart, I was sad that I didn't get to be a part of that experience. And I thought to myself, I miss them and I don't want to continue in this way. And so I went and gave them a hug and said hi. And then I went and sat with my sister and we didn't really talk, I don't think, much that day. And then it was a series of really slow steps. My brother's wedding, slowly starting to communicate via email. And then because my parents, they weren't living in Canada at that time for periods of time. And so I decided to go and see them and spend some time back home after I separated from my ex-wife because I needed to go back home and just get rooted again.
Mm.
And I remember being very nervous because I'm like, whew, okay, how's this gonna go? Right? Because
Yeah.
not only have I not seen them, I haven't been home for a long time. And I saw them at the airport and it was like old times. My family, we don't talk about emotions. We don't talk about this kind of stuff, right?
Mhm.
But we show, so for me, it's been learning, especially with my son, talk about emotions, those kinds of things. We show it through actions, right? And so, through cooking, through care, through those kinds of things. And so that's how I knew we were slowly rebuilding that
Mhm.
relationship. And it takes time, right? And it also takes navigation of your own boundaries also, and what's healthy and what's not, right? How much time, how much space will help you maintain that healthiness,
Mhm.
because I had to have boundaries as well with how much time do I go and spend, because in the beginning it was just me. And so I had to still, dichotomize my life and not talk about my life. And it was only in the past few years, where my mom has gotten to know my partner, my son, where I can live my full life with my family. I can say this, that the one thing we cannot stop in our life is time. We can't stop time, we can't get it back, and if I were to have time with my father on this earth, I would have perhaps had some more conversations with him. But it's okay, because I have it with him on the other side.
Mm.
And that's sometimes, no matter what you believe in, however, whoever, whatever, if you believe in anything, trying to find your peace, right? Your peace through a compassionate way. And it's an ongoing journey, Giselle, right? Like, I'm not arrived. I would love to say I've arrived. But it continues to be small steps, right?
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So, in order for you to get to the point where you could invite even just the reconciliation, was there a level of forgiveness that needed to happen for yourself and for your parents?
Mm-hmm. I think for both, I think for both. Because once again, we both have our stories, right? And I'm sure that my parents were hurt profoundly. And that's their journey. I don't know, they're hurt, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's
Yeah.
their journey of their lost hopes, their lost dreams, their whatever it is, right? And for me, I've reframed it. I tried to reframe it for them. It's not lost. It's just different. Just looks
Yeah.
different, right? Just looks different than what you imagine. I live a full life with a loving partner, a beautiful son, a beautiful home with my 2 dogs. When you think about those things, right? Like what parents dream about as success, right? To have a good family, a good life. I have those things. I just want to say that forgiveness is an ongoing journey. Because also, what I've realized about my brain is that my brain has been traumatized by significant events in my life, right? And the disowning was a significant event in my life. And so there are things that I don't remember or that come to me as I get older. And so, in the sense that forgiveness is an ongoing journey, and I'm sure that it is for my parents as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. In order for you to be able to have some sort of reconciliation, you had to deal with your internalized homophobia. Can you talk a little bit about that and that journey?
Absolutely. So my parents are from India. I identified as a proud Goan. I'm from Goa. I give that context, right? Because India was colonized. I grew up in a family with strong Catholic faith. I grew up not seeing any images or any representation of LGBTQ identities.
Yeah.
We didn't really talk about, being gay, being queer, being lesbian. And the only times that we did, it was in a way that was derogatory. And if there were people who we thought might be part of the community, it was always like people spoke negatively about them, right? And also back home, it's illegal. And so to me,
Yeah.
like it's against the law. And so I grew up with a strong sense that it's not okay to be gay. And also, there's no words in our language in Konkani for the word gay, lesbian, And so I had no exposure. And so it's that whole cliche, I always knew I was different kind of thing, but not recognizing what that might be. And so when I came to Canada and started in university to be exposed to different communities and identities and, it can be such a formative time for folks. And for me, it was also being exposed to different people and that I'd never been exposed to and starting to understand myself in different ways. And I had huge internalized struggles, learning that growing up thinking, oh my God, being gay was bad, to now going, oh my God, I think I'm gay. And then going, oh my God, what is that going to mean? Like, am I going to lose people? Like, am I going to be in trouble? What's wrong with me? And I also saw people in the queer community and university, but they were all white. And so as I was working through my internalized homophobia, I tried to find space in the queer community, which was predominantly white. So then I had to experience racism.
Yeah.
And it was that living in liminal spaces, right? Not really belonging in either space. And so I had really had to process through, and for me, I'm the kind of person who I have to feed my brain before I feed my heart.
Mm.
And so for me, it helped me to learn about the history of sexual orientations and gender identity in my culture's pre-colonization and how we were
Beautiful.
welcomed. We've existed from time immemorial. And it's
Mm.
only colonization that's come and said, okay, no, it has to be male and female and this and that and all of that. Right. And so it was the finding some roots, finding
Mm.
community, but you take the best with all, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And but have I arrived, Giselle? Once again, it's my own ideal. I question my own internalized racism, homophobia, internalized ableism every day, right? It's an ongoing process.
It's interesting how in colonization, all the fundamental things that make us caring human beings sort of got eliminated. Living in communities, generosity, equality, empathy, and compassion, acceptance, inclusion, all
Yeah,
of those things sort of like, it's almost like we divorced from ourselves, right? We became so separate from who we really are in ourselves. That's led to the propagation of colonization, which is really, really interesting. And I think now we're in the process as humanity to come back to ourselves and to each other. Because when I think about, we don't live in community anymore. Our communities are like our nuclear family, if you may. But
yeah,
when you
yeah,
think about caregiving, in the olden times when we lived in sort of like villages, there was the grandparents and the kids, and the grandparents usually took care of the kids, which makes them younger. And then the older people would do lots of different things. And we sort of lost that connection. We've sort of created all
yeah,
this space between us.
yeah.
Our communities were so small. I don't think that that kind of separation would have been possible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's just it, Giselle. We have become so separate because that is part of colonization, which is tied to capitalism, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's about creating classes of income. It's about who can achieve. I grew up in a collectivist culture. My humanity is tied in yours, Giselle. And that is what drives everything that I do. And I will offer a reframe that it was olden times in here, but in other parts in the world, it still exists, right? And so, how do we bring this community of compassionate care together in a new way, right? Because you're right, like, I just returned from Nunavut, and from Rankin Inlet and Cambridge Bay. And, you can see the sense of community there, the sense of caring there, the sense of connection. And it is rooted in their values. It is not only because of who they are, but it was the necessity
Yeah.
that they had to be together, right? Because of the land
Mm-hmm.
and the landscape. And so what I would love to see is for us to find that urgency of necessity to be together and to care for one another. Because
Mm-hmm.
until we find that necessity where your humanity is tied up into mine, we'll just continue on with this dominance, right? With
Yeah.
the same tyranny of time that I talked about a little bit earlier on in a different meeting,
Yeah. Yeah.
which pulls that compassion away from us.
Hmm. Yeah. And we can't be in survival mode and be in compassion. We can't be in
No.
fear and be in love. It makes it really, really difficult. And so, I always think of the colonizers. I'm like, what must their life have been like that they needed that they felt like they didn't have enough? So it's always more and more and more and more, like having to fill that empty hole, right? With more money, with more things and
Yeah,
more materials and more land. It's never enough. But I find
yeah,
when you're trying to fill it with stuff that doesn't fit there, it's a pit. It's a
yeah,
never ending filling.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Mm.
I know. I've often wondered that too, right? I would love to go back in time and listen to their stories,
And
right?
try to understand, yeah. And you mentioned listening to stories, and I think for me, curiosity is the stepping stone to compassion, right? I'm trying to
Absolutely.
understand your story. And so the more I listen to you, the more I
Yeah.
understand. And I'm a big lover of Louise Hay, which is like
Yes.
everybody's doing the best they
Yes,
can with the understanding, knowledge, and awareness that they have at the
they
time,
have. Yeah.
right? For some people, their story makes sense to them, even if it's just a justification, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And what you have just said on is the essence of where I am at this point in my life. I truly believe that people do the best that they can at the point in their life with the resources that they have, just as my parents did. Just as I did, just as
Mm,
I do.
yeah.
As I say to my son, I'm an imperfect person, and please have patience with me as I have
Yeah.
patience with you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's amazing. Like, I wasn't taught that parents could be questioned, right? And so for me to be able to be honest with my children and say, I'm not always
Yeah,
going to get it right. I don't always know what I'm doing. Please forgive me. I'm
yeah,
sorry that I hurt you. It's such a
yeah,
like departure from my parents, right? Because there's a lot of denial and there's a lot of, no, this isn't true. It hasn't happened. And so to be able to actually do that for our children, I can't remember where I heard it, but this is sort of like these generations are the ones that are reparenting themselves and at the same time trying to parent the next generation. And that's how I feel.
oh,
I relate to that,
yeah,
to have to address all my fears,
yeah,
my limitations, my
yeah,
thinking, my trauma, my biases, so that it stops with me and it doesn't get transferred to my children and their children's children and so on. And so
yeah,
the willingness to be able to do that, even so it's difficult, it's necessary.
yeah, absolutely. That I felt that in my heart, Giselle, because
Hmm.
yeah, I really feel like I'm trying to reparent myself and do things differently so that certain things end with me and
Yeah.
don't get passed to my boy. I want lots of good things to pass to my boy,
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
but not the difficult trauma, the impacts of those
Mm.
things, and also the intergenerational stuff, right? And that's the compassion I think we can have for our ancestors as well.
Yeah.
Because I stand before you and sit before you as a representation of those who came before me, just as you do with you, right? And
Mm.
so, how can we carry on that torch and those values that we're sharing today and moving it forward? Because I think the world needs a little bit more compassion and love and light and
Definitely.
empathy.
Yeah,
Empathy.
definitely. I was thinking about as you were talking about how I've had to really shift my perspective on my ancestors. I was very mad at my ancestors because there was a lot of trauma passed down. There was a lot of like neglect. There was a lot of abuse. There was a lot of
Mm,
poverty. There were so many different things. And so I think when I was younger, there was an aspect of me of like, why couldn't you get your SHIT together? So that my parents
yeah.
weren't so traumatized when they raised me. But now I have a different perspective. It's interesting. Once I sat down with my dad and he was telling me the history, all the things that they went through, and they managed to survive. They managed to survive the war. They managed to
Yeah.
survive poverty. They managed to survive deep, deep trauma.
Yeah.
And so it gave me a new perspective around how can I have appreciation for their strength? How can I acknowledge the strength they gave me? How can I acknowledge the resiliency they gave me? How can I acknowledge all of the history in a way that comes from a place of gratitude rather than from a place of judgment?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, and as I go through my own journey of healing my own trauma and doing all of that, I see how difficult it is. I see how dynamic it can be and feel and how much courage it even took. I mean, when you're in the middle of the war, you're not thinking, I really got to deal with my trauma. You're just
I gotta
coping,
live. Yeah.
right? You got to live. So I'm so proud of my ancestors for having survived so much
Yeah.
and for everything that got me here, right? But I
Yeah.
didn't always feel that way.
Yeah. And that's humble of you to say, Giselle, right? And I think that that's part of also our development and our growth as people, right? Is how do we come to understand it? Because, yeah, like there were times I was angry too. And, I've come to see that they have all done their own healing work in their own ways, right? Whatever that
Yeah.
is, which has cumulatively helped me reach this point where I can sit in this room in Canada, have this conversation with
Yeah.
you. It was unimaginable to me as a child in Bahrain. So, I thank you for this opportunity,
Yeah, for sure. And I'm so grateful that you are here. I wanted to go back to you had said that you had to go through your own process of dealing with your internalized homophobia. What things really helped you to be able to do that for yourself?
Well, the first thing is finding a community was huge. So finding
Mhm.
resources, finding support, because once again, there's nothing like being with people who are in the same situation, and finding somebody to help you process things through. So whether it's a counselor, whether it's your imam, whether it's your whoever it is, somebody who is knowledgeable in dealing and helping people to process through their internalized homophobia. I've had people who did it well and people who did not. So
Yeah.
I've learned from both. And also now we are in the time and the space to we have so much access to information, right? Like I was out in
Yeah.
the 90s. Like in the 90s, we didn't have Google. We didn't have podcasts. We didn't
Or
have
TikTok, yeah, that connects
TikTok or
millions
those
and
kinds.
millions of people.
Yeah, or those kinds of things, right? So there are lots of resources out there. Find ones, though, that feed your soul. And now there is also representation from folks in the LGBTQ community from different identities, who are racialized, who are, when you think about intersectionality of identities. And I think was also a really huge thing for me, which I did not experience as people with a good understanding of intersectionality and how all the different parts of me impact my experience of homophobia and internalized homophobia. And so, finding resources that speak to you as a person.
Can you just tell my audience what intersectionality is for some of them that are
Oh,
not going to know
yeah.
what that means?
Yeah. Great. So, intersectionality is a term that was coined by Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw, and it is used to describe how intersecting forms of oppression impact on people. So, when I say intersecting forms of oppression, so if you look at me, I experience on an average day when I go out in the world, I can experience racism because of the color of my skin. I can experience homophobia because of my sexual orientation. I can experience transphobia because of how I dress and present in the world and my gender identity. I can also experience ableism because I live with different forms of invisible disabilities. So when you take all of those things together, they don't work in silos, because I say when I enter the room, I'm not just brown Iona or, queer Iona. I'm Iona in all of the pieces that I am. So intersectionality is how all of those forms of isms work together and impact on people. And so when I think about supports for people who might be coming out, might be experiencing their own internalized homophobia, the first thing I want to say to you, to the people who are out there, who might be listening, is that you are beautiful and perfect just the way you are.
Yes.
And that, you belong in this world, in society, exactly how you are. And that you are worthy of love, of safety, of joy, and to live a life where you not just survive, but where you thrive.
Yeah.
And there's a resurgence of a lot of homophobia, a lot of transphobia. I was just saying to my partner the other day, I can't believe I'm still fighting over the same fight and protests like 25 years later about people who are protesting the existence of our lives, and so to be mindful of what you also expose yourself to with social media, because it does impact on your brain and your well-being. and to find your places and your pockets of safety and hope. Find your communities because they're out there.
Oh, thank you. That was wonderful. It's interesting that, the world is so vast and people's perspectives are so different, right? That there's still people who think it's a choice. And I remember our mutual friend that, he would tell me, like, why would I choose this? Why would I choose to not belong? It would be just so
Yeah.
easy for me to make this choice versus this other choice. And so it's not anything that I would be choosing because I don't want to choose to be different. Everybody wants to belong, right? That's just our innate nature. But from my perspective, God's source universe never makes a mistake. And so we are all perfect. We're all beautiful. We may make choices that are maybe not so loving sometimes, but we always have the ability to come back to our true selves, which is, from my perspective, our original, most compassionate selves. But yeah, it's interesting. And I don't know if I've shared this with you. I've heard the best reasoning behind homophobia and all isms.
Okay, tell me. Tell
Um,
me.
so it's from, have you heard of the comedian Alok?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, they
Okay,
then
yeah.
had said
Yeah,
in
yeah,
an
yeah.
interview, and I loved
Yeah.
it. They were talking about the acceptance of trans people. And they mentioned the fact that the reason why some people struggle with that is because them are being the most authentically themselves. And in a world where we don't like
Yep.
authenticity, where we're so
Yep.
terrified of it, when we're not allowed to be our authentic self, it's threatening. It's threatening to see people being authentically themselves because then do we have them to be authentic ourselves? And it shines a light on us when we are not being authentically
Yep.
ourselves. It took a while for me to figure out where I was being authentic and where I wasn't. Like, how many things did I think I had to have, like the marriage, the specific job, and the specific income, and the specific car, and the type of house, and all of that stuff? How much was it something that I was conditioned to accept as something I should want versus how much is it that my soul really wants?
Yeah.
The worst part is I wasn't aware that there was a different me, a little me that was screaming to come out and say, those things don't really resonate with us. I want to do this. I want to do that.
Yeah,
I want to
yeah.
play. I want to be joyful. I don't want to care about how much money I make. I don't want to care about the things that people told me that I should care about.
Yeah.
And so that is sort of the journey in coming home to ourselves and doing things that authentically align with your higher self, your joyful self, right? I never thought I'd be doing a podcast. This brings me extraordinary joy. This is me. This is who I am, and all the things that I'm doing right now are things that bring me incredible joy. I don't know if it's on the recording, but you were talking about how you never thought you were going to stay in child welfare 2 years and then I'm out.
Yeah.
For me, it was the reverse. I'd wanted to work in child welfare since I was 15.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to live and die in child welfare. I thought, if this is my dream, this is me rescuing myself and my mother and my family, my ancestors, I'm going to revolutionize child welfare and then it's all going to be good. And then to think that I'm doing something totally different, it was not in my bingo card.
Yeah.
Right? But that's when you start to connect with more of your authentic self and say, okay, who am I really? And what do I really love? What do I really want to do? And in a world where you are punished for not conforming, it feels very difficult. And I don't think it's purposeful, but as I'm co-writing a book with my daughter, I did my first book, Reimagining Work, and now we are doing Reimagining Education. We don't realize how in the education system, we are reinforcing consciously or subconsciously the belief that difference is bad because there has to be one right answer. There's only one way to do things. And so diversity is not welcome.
That's
and so
in all
how
systems,
do we, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
But it starts when they're very little.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And so how do we educate our children to be open to diversity, into differences, and to sit in the gray, and to be more critical thinkers? I wanted to ask you a question about your work because this is something that I've observed. And so I wanted you to comment on it. There's many organizations that want to do the DEI work, that want to bring, the representation and inclusivity, but they don't do the work to cultivate the ground. And so when they bring in the people, you're setting them up to fail.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about that? And how do we
Yep.
help these organizations establish the ground?
Yeah, great question. Because I have worked with many folks who want to do the right thing, increase diversity, increase representation, all of those good things, right? But it has to be done in a thoughtful way, in a thoughtful and strategic way. Because I always say that it's very easy to hire, to get diversity, but it's the retention. It's whether people stay. And so this is where it requires leadership to create the climate where people can join and where people feel a sense of belonging, contribution, and inclusion. So not just, we have a racialized person, oh, we have a whatever person, right? How do they feel a sense of belonging? How do they feel that their voice is being heard? So what leaders can do is create the groundwork right from the beginning, right? On the fact that this is work that the organization is going to be doing to hire folks from different communities, different identities, talk about why that's important, tie it in to your organizational goals and outcomes, and prepare your organization and staff in the sense of not making it about the person, oh, Iona's coming, but about the organization and the growth and the direction we want to go in. Because I have been in organizations where people have hired me, and that's great, they want me, but then when I get in there, I'm like, okay, so you want me, but you don't necessarily want my ideas. And like what work has been done here to get ready to create spaces and places where people can have different conversations, are open to various perspectives, right? And you said something really important around children and education. And where do these conversations start? They start at the kitchen table. They start when you tuck your kid in at bedtime. And if they don't start there, then they start at university. They start when I'm sitting with somebody who is 70 years old and we're having a conversation. It can start anytime. You know, that's the beauty of humanity and of growth. We can grow and learn anytime. But if you're looking at it from an organizational perspective, there are certain tangible things that leaders can do to get spaces ready so that people can not only exist and join your organization, but they can thrive there. Because when you look at your data and if you see people coming in and leaving shortly after, that tells me that y'all have work to do in creating places that demonstrate true inclusion.
Yeah, I love that. I appreciate that. Yeah. I wanted to go back to your journey of reconciliation after estrangement and talk a little bit about your partner's journey. It must have been really challenging, and so I'm curious. You must have had to kind of balance the relationship with your partner and also the relationship with your parents in a way that led to the reconciliation. How difficult was it to manage, and were there things you found that helped?
What helped the most, I think, is that my partner is the pillar of patience, because that could have broken our relationship, quite honestly. And, you know, I appreciated that she allowed me to walk that journey in the way that I needed to walk it, with her by my side when I needed her to be, and alone when I needed to do it alone. Was it easy? No. Was it painful? Yeah. Did we cry? Yeah. Were there times where, you know, we had to have serious conversations about my relationship with you is primary, and they are my parents. And she never made me choose, and I always appreciated that. And she never made me feel guilty for any choices that I made. But did it come at a cost? I'm sure it has. Well, I know it has profoundly impacted her, and that's her journey. And I can't speak to that, but for me, you know, it was definitely something we had to navigate for many years. And, you know, and it was hard. It was hard for me. It was hard for all of us, but I think it was hard for me because, you know, I mean, and you know my partner, she's amazing. And I feel sad that, you know, my dad gets to know her from the other side, but didn't get to know her in this dimension.
Yeah, and I like your perspective in terms of the being able to still connect. Because even if you don't believe that there is more to this life than this, write a letter to someone and burn it. It's just a way to get your voice out, right? Two more questions. The First one is, I'm asking everyone this season what their definition of self-love is.
Oh, that's a profound question. That gave me chills. I think it's so profound for me at this point in time because I'm still figuring that out. What does that mean for myself, you know? Because I've lived with so many voices in my head telling me things about my worthiness or unworthiness or whatever, right? That have impacted how I see myself and my ability to love myself. And so now I'm actively working on who do I allow in my space, in my body? Who do I allow to occupy space in my brain? You know, and being very conscious also of how do I feel on a very visceral. So really paying attention. So for me, because I've spent from the age of 6 to now, like being like disjointed from my body due to traumatic events. Now, my self-love is how to bring myself back together in a new way. And thinking about also, you know, who do I expose myself to? What do I expose myself to? Because that releases different chemicals in my body. And I want to release chemicals of joy and positivity and not to be naive because there's pain and heartache in the world. I know that. But I think for me, my self-love is how to experience those moments, honor them, and walk through them and continue to find joy and beauty every day, really every day, even in the smallest things, even if it is just laying on the ground with my Penny, who's my puppy, and just staring at her eyes for 10 minutes. You know, we do that sometimes, you know, and that's what my self-love is. It's finding my way to myself. And I think my biggest thing, Giselle, is learning how to talk to myself like somebody who I love. Because I think this is the first time in my life as an adult that I'm learning how to do that. That's what my self-love is.
It's been interesting for me in my journey learning to understand that my body is not my enemy.
Your body is what?
That my body is not my enemy.
Yes.
Yeah, that my body is not separate from me. It's actually my house, right? So feeling like it's not separate from me, that it can't hurt me. It's actually my very best friend, and it's my hope for this lifetime, right? Last question is, where can people find you? Where can people work with you? What's your website? What do you want to share with the audience?
Awesome. People can find me. Check out my website at skyconsulting.com. You can email me, isky@skyconsulting.com. I'm on LinkedIn. Drop me a line. You know, I always say that I work with anybody who really wants to do this work in a meaningful way and make real change and take the principles of equity, diversity, inclusion, accessibility, and put it into action. And I'm also a social worker, right? And I love supporting folks with their clinical work and social work skills and leadership, because to me, this work is about how do we show up every day? Whether we're a leader, whether we're a fundraiser, whether we're a parent, whether whoever we are, right? You know, Giselle, you came into my life like a gift when we worked together.
Aww.
And I am grateful for you and for this opportunity, because I count you as one of the people who have impacted me and continue to. And so thank you for having me on your show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Iona, for coming to the show. I feel the same way. You're such a gift to me. And the times when we work together were just some of the best times I've had, honestly. And thank you to everyone who joined us for another episode of Love and Compassion with Giselle. And we will see you soon.